James Whelton is an Irish entrepreneur, programmer, and co-founder of CoderDojo, a network of free computer coding clubs for children, which reaches hundreds of thousands of young people in over 110 countries across the globe. James has built a wide array of software products, served as CTO for several e-commerce and technology companies, along with being a venture capital advisor. James taught himself coding as a child and spent his teens building software and hacking. And at the age of 18, he founded CoderDojo along with entrepreneur Bill Liao while heading up his school's computer club in Cork, Ireland. Now, having just turned 30 years old, James is currently focused on building Conjure, a next-generation behaviour change and achievements platform to help people achieve outcomes important to them, identify and build habits conducive to life satisfaction, and help them become who they want to become. So, James Whelton, welcome to the LifeLab, and thanks for being here. It's great to see you. It's been a long time.
Good to see you too, Siobhan. It's been an age.
It's been an age. So we've spoken a little bit about the LifeLab and the premise of it and everything, and I thought we could start off with you telling everyone how you got into coding as a little kid in Ireland, which was quite unusual at the time, and how that ended up leading you to found CoderDojo.
Yeah, so I think I made my first website when I was around 9 or 10 years old. And the precursor to it was that we had this PC at home. I loved playing with it, exploring it, and I started making little animations in Microsoft Paint. And then I figured out that if you open them in like Windows Movie Maker and put a bunch of these images together made in Microsoft Paint, you could then animate them. And this purely came from just spending time on the computer playing around. And the next step was I wanted to show people at school these animations. And I don't know where it came from, but the obvious solution was to like put them on a website. So I got a book in, I think it was like Eason's bookstore in Patrick Street in Cork, not the exact like tech hub. I got this book on HTML and started following it on like building a website and adding like heading text or paragraph text and images. And I by no means was like a wunderkind. Like I always thought that it was odd that I stayed after school for a little bit to get extra classes on maths and like spelling and stuff. So I was a little bit oblivious to my current education status at that age. And I didn't like also like tear through the book. It took me like a few weeks to embed an image because I didn't figure out it had to be like in a directory relative to the web page and stuff. But it was a self-taught process, albeit quite slow. And I think from there, I fell in love with the idea that you could code something and bring it to life, make something real, and then in terms of the internet, that anybody in the world could see it. Like I could make this website and put it online, and somebody in like Japan or someone in America could see it. There definitely was nobody in those countries looking at my 10-year-old
Not
web
then.
pages, but I like to believe. I was also going to go to Hogwarts, but that didn't pan out.
You would have been great in Hogwarts, James.
Thank you. I think so too. But that's that kind of began me on this path of I don't know, this real passion for computers and building things, and that kind of naturally led me to creating games or like being interested in hacking and how you got into things and like really exploring that landscape. And that was, I think that was a large part of my identity through the teens. I found it kind of quite challenging because I wasn't particularly academic or particularly sporty. I did skateboarding and some other stuff, but a lot of these outlets for kind of, let's say, recognition and socializing in secondary school, there wasn't one there for coding.
So it's surprising to me that you weren't academic. My perception of you, like knowing you and working with you before, is that you would have been super academic.
Oh no, I'm really good at putting up appearances.
You really are.
I think that the whole not academic thing, I had like a little bit of a false narrative around in my like late teens and early 20s, because I kind of thought that like, oh, I'm not good at remembering stuff, or that I can't sit down and study, so I kind of have to like try and think my way around the problem or solution or sidestep it. But the more that I learned about how my attention and focus works and motivation, the more I learn around systems of like applying that, or that sometimes it is just going to suck and you're going to have to like sit there and memorize something, but take breaks. So,
And what was your motivation at that age? I mean, because you were still so young.
yeah, I think that it was just like that very quick feedback loop of like you code something, be it a website or a game or something, and you see some progress, you get a little hit of dopamine, and then you keep on going, and it's super academic, or sorry, it's super like fast paced, versus the academic thing, which is like, okay, well, if I learn this paragraph about stalagmites and stalactites in geography, like maybe my parents aren't going to scream at me when some of the results come out.
I think everyone in Ireland had to learn about stalagmites and stalactites. It's just like
there's so I think that later on in life I learned more about my learning style, and then how I could learn and kind of challenge maybe some of these false narratives that I built up. But I wasn't super engaged in secondary school, and that was very frustrating that I could go home and build these sites and do these things I was really proud about, but kind of then also be like failing past maths and kind of like beating myself up a bit, and not just not.
Yeah, and like going home, you're saying you're going home and doing all that stuff. Were people back then, I mean, obviously that's super advanced for a kid that age to be doing that stuff, in, you know, despite what was happening academically in school. Do you think people knew then, oh wow, this kid is you know, a bit exceptional, or, you know, is doing something really cool? Or were people just like, oh, they didn't understand?
I think it was the opposite. I think when so CoderDojo started because I was running this coding club in my secondary school, and the way that came to be was that I got like some like I was the first to find an exploit for a particular version of the iPod Nano, and I got my 15 minutes of internet fame on like Apple blogs. And
you did. It's still there on the internet, haunting you forever.
Yeah. Well, people in my school were like, well, if that idiot Whelton can program, surely we can. So they went up to me and they were like, yeah, how do we do this, or how do you make games? So I like to think that I made it accessible for people. I was the lowest common denominator. I think that maybe back then there was like people were maybe like my parents a little bit were kind of conflating was like consuming or creating, and I think particularly now as we like people have a better understanding of like, there's a big difference between, let's say, maybe playing a game on a computer versus like building a website, or even like making mods for that game or something. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that there was that understanding back then. Which was challenging. Like my parents used to take like the Ethernet cable from like the router when they would leave to try and make me study, and of course I have a few backups. So like I'd watch the car go like leave, and then I'd go take a new one and plug it in, or go to like internet cafes in between like supervised study in school with like a USB stick and like work on websites then. So yeah, but that was a very like frustrating thing, that the disconnect between those two worlds as a young person.
And then you started an after school club. How did that come about, and what age were you when you started? Because that's, you know, that's very kind of leadership-y type action to do that, to set up an after school club for kids. How did it come about? Yeah,
the how it came about was in my final year of secondary school, 6th year, I won a prize at this like website making contest, and at that event I also won like a pink iPod Nano. It was like the first iPod Nano with the touchscreen, and I just like messed around with it, and I was able to get it to do some things that it normally shouldn't do or couldn't do, and just posted that online, and that got picked up, and there was a bit of like exceptionalism to the headline. Like personally, what I thought I did wasn't like that impressive. It was cool, but it wasn't anything compared to like the guys who were like jailbreaking and unlocking the iPhone. But they were like, oh, schoolboy hacks Apple iPod, all this kind of way. So I got my 15 minutes, and then that kind of made word around school that I'd kind of won this competition, but also this thing had happened, and people came up to me and were like, oh, well, yeah, and again, my reputation, like academic wise, was not great in school. I once fell asleep in my English class and woke up in the next period's English class because the teachers thought it was so funny that I slept through the bell.
Wow.
So, yeah, they're like, well, if that guy can code, like then. I put together a a group. It was about maybe 40 students twice a week after school in our school's computer room. We were extremely fortunate to have like a computer room and those kind of things. And I had some exposure to like computer science at third level. I dropped in on some lectures in the local university, and I wasn't a fan of like how the first like application you'd build would be like a mortgage calculator or something that I couldn't relate to. So when we started running these sessions after school, and in fairness, there was like actually one or two other people in my school who were interested and kind of played around separately, but didn't necessarily hadn't known about each other or connected. So we started like, you know, running sessions on how to make a website and try and like do it really quickly in the first hour, where you have like text and images and embed like a Google map or something. And then we teach you how to, you know, if you want to do something more, like, I don't know, embed a YouTube video where like, okay, well, this is how you Google it. This is how you figure out how to do it for yourself, self-teach. Or if we made a game, we'd, you know, make these games and have a competition who could make like the worst game and show that off at the end. So try to make it very removed from the classroom environment, engaging. And so that was basically how it came to be. And the biggest thing was just to have fun after school. And like there was no grand ambition that, you know, I'm trying to educate the youth or trying to like start this revolution. It's like, you know, this is something I like. This is something important to me, and I have fun doing this, and others will too. So,
but then you did start a revolution, because CoderDojo teaches hundreds and hundreds of thousands of kids, right, across 110 countries in the world.
I assure you, it is totally unexpected. That was it was a real it was really surprising. There was no grand ambition to do something like that, or kind of, you know, careful market analysis. No. Like, well, you know, we're at this inflection point and we get these young people these economic opportunities, and we make some VCs very rich or something. That
came later. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
What happened was people from other schools started hearing about our club and like started seeing what their friends were making, be it like websites or apps or games, and they reached out to me and they're like, hey, we'd like to join this club, or, you know, how could we do one of these in our school? And then at the same time, you know, I was approaching the end of my secondary school career, if you can call it that. Train wreck maybe is another synonym. So the people in my club were like, well, you know, what's going to happen next year? How's it going to run? What are we going to do during the summer? We've got these 3 months. And around the same time, I was invited to speak at a tech conference in Ireland, Web Summit, about, you know, my 15 minutes of internet fame around this iPod stuff. So that event, I met somebody who'd been an entrepreneur investor who was based in Cork with a technology background, Bill. And Bill, Bill had also been a coder growing up. And
that's Bill Liao, right?
Yeah, Bill Liao. And he identified with kind of, many of the things I was talking about like not having that place in school or this kind of sense of identity. But outside of, let's say, maybe the passion aspect of it, he had seen that there was a real demand for programmers and software developers, and that, you know, this in many ways was the great equalizer, that you could be, it really didn't matter what background you came from. If you spent the time and got good with coding or had an aptitude for it, there was endless opportunities. So he we spent time together. We talked about how could we run one of these clubs just to see what happens outside of school. I was definitely a little bit less optimistic than him. He was like, you know, we could probably get someone to give us space for free. You know, we'll have it all volunteers, keep all money out of it. And I was like, really? Is somebody going to give us like space for free? So we decided to go ahead, and I think it was maybe 2 weeks after I finished the Leaving Cert, we ran the first one of these clubs with very low expectations. We just said, we're going to take it out of my school, put it here. We're going to open it up to people, and just see what happens. See if anyone comes along. And then soon people started coming from Dublin, which is maybe like a 2.5, 3 hour drive away. Yeah. People really identified with what we were trying to do and the ethos, and wanted to start their own clubs, and it just kind of spiraled out of control from there. No, it spiraled very much in control. Somewhat.
Did you stay involved then? I mean, was that something that you focused on after you finished the Leaving Cert, which is the final exam in Ireland for students before they go to university? did you keep going, or did you just kind of like, you were the founder and then you kind of went on your way?
Yeah, this was 2011. So while doing CoderDojo, and as that kind of matured and evolved and spread as a movement, I also had like a ill-fated social media monitoring startup, which was kind of very much so in vogue. I think if it's like AI now, a year ago was crypto, then 2011 was definitely social media. Was the trend. So I had this like idea of like, oh, I could do this like nonprofit thing, and that's really good. And then I'll also do like a startup. And I was very highly influenced by, I guess, like seeing Silicon Valley culture from abroad, and they put those kind of young founder types on pedestals. And like the social network had come out, and it was all very attractive. And I think maybe a few months into those both going concurrently, it was very clear that CoderDojo was making impact and was significant to a lot of young people. It was clear that the social media social media monitoring startup absolutely was not that. This is kind of a heuristic you can use about is something pushing you or pulling you. So they say like building a startup or a product, it can be like pushing a boulder uphill. And the real test is, does it get to a point where it's like the boulder is running downhill and you have to chase after it. And I think that's a pretty good way of identifying if something has traction and impact. So yeah, CoderDojo was definitely going downhill, and the social media monitoring startup boulder was kind of rolling back on top of me almost. So I said, yeah, I think it was going to be a shame not to pursue CoderDojo to its fullest and really push that and see how many people we could reach and how much impact we could make. So for the next 3 years, I focused on CoderDojo, started the CoderDojo Foundation, built a team around that, and tried to build a structure to promote the spread and running of CoderDojo in different countries.
And now you're involved, you're a co-founder and you attend events and things, but you're not as much involved in it anymore.
Pretty much. I go to parties. I'm like, hey, remember me? That has been 10 years on.
I'm the reason you're all here today.
If anything, traditionally, I was considered more the liability than the founder of CoderDojo, I think.
But what is it like? I mean, you just turned 30 this year, right? What is it like achieving that kind of success at such a young age? I mean, it's very unusual. So what's your take on it now that you can look back on it a bit?
Yeah, it's like success feels like a strange term, and I suppose it depends in which like domain do we want to look at it. If we say that I had like some level of exposure and impact on others, then it was maybe a little bit ill prepared for that. So I think when you're in a leadership position, people are looking to you for leadership. People want your time. People do put you on a bit of a pedestal, and like I went through the kind of motions of like I became a Forbes 30 under 30 at 19. I kind of got this accolade, was in this local newspaper or whatever. And concurrent to that, I really didn't know how to look after myself. Like I was still growing as a young person. I didn't go to college. A lot of people during college, that's a time for them to develop as a person. Your brain is still forming. You're learning how to like eat the appropriate amount of calories each day at the right times, get the right amount of sleep or not sleep in a lot of college cases. So I didn't really have that. And then also I think if you are a leader in some capacity or people depend on you, you're almost like an athlete in that you need to look after your performance. You need to be well-centered for the sake of yourself and others. So it ultimately happened after 3 years of CoderDojo growing and the foundation is that I burnt out, that I kind of got to this place where the foundation and organization aspect needed somebody who could define success, could define metrics, could define, this cadence of monthly, quarterly, annual objectives, let people, if they're being successful or not successful. A lot of these kind of organizational governance skills that I didn't have, and frankly probably wasn't in the right state to learn because I was so spread thin. And I also developed a couple of neuroses probably around, like what if I look stupid? What if I make a mistake, and that somehow like whatever about me, but that it affects the children and they stop coming to CoderDojo, or all these volunteers, I disappoint them.
Do you think that
So I
was
definitely,
because you're under so much pressure at such a young age that it's natural to kind of have some impact on your mental health when, like you said, people were looking at you for leadership and you were only like in your early 20s?
yeah, I definitely do think that was a factor of youth, and some people, like I've seen young founders who grow with that fantastic, and that they have like the right mechanisms for coping with that or keeping that in check. I think with me, which was totally normal, is that I was just in many ways so afraid of making mistakes or disappointing people, that I was often paralyzed by this, or like some days be like, well, if I just, I've got this big thing to do, maybe if I just don't get out of bed, then I won't have to do it, or I can't look stupid if I don't make the decision. And I was fortunate that I did have a lot of good mentors around me, and that towards the end of the 3 years, I had a colleague who was like, I don't know what's going on with you, but you need to see someone, you need to see a therapist. She gave me the details of a therapist, which I'm incredibly grateful for, because that allowed me to work through a lot of this stuff. And I think when you're like, if we talk about a human and your evolutionary wiring, you're kind of wired to want to gain more success or gain more status. You normalize a lot of these things. So I also thought that I had to keep on pushing myself, which can be your undoing. You kind of get this reinforced lesson that if you're successful and you receive praise or love, then I'm only worthy of love and praise and acceptance if I continue to succeed. So I think that can put you in quite a perilous place, which so at the kind of the end of the 3 years of CoderDojo as CEOs, the foundation, we hired in a wonderful new CEO, she was hugely experienced and was the right person for the role, who could grow that organization. And then I went away and decided to identify my gaps and try and work on them. And the other thing that was very clear to me was that a large part of success, quote unquote, is being in the right place at the right time. So it just so happened that I was graduating secondary school when the interest in programming was hitting like a new peak. There was a social network, like computer clubs or coding clubs weren't new. They were kind of prevalent in the 70s. I was very fortunate that I grew up in a house that had a PC and I had access to, and that I was able to spend time on, whether or not my parents knew it. So there was a large part of that success was made up by circumstance. And I spent time in my 20s trying to decompile that and be like, okay, well, if I didn't have that circumstance, how could I be successful again or do something in a new domain? So there was a good degree of kind of like that success early 20s, being like, how the hell did I end up here? I don't know.
I think that's a really great message, though, that you're sharing about the therapy and working on yourself and addressing situations when they get out of hand and you need support for your mental health, especially for young people, but for everyone really, because I think a lot of people, it's still quite nascent. I know people talk about mental health a lot, but even just working on yourself, and that, because it's very hard to do that. It takes a lot of work, and I mean it's so rewarding if you do it, but I think it's great that you're able to share that with people, because it's it just destigmatizes it, that everyone should probably get therapy. I mean, everyone has probably some kind of trauma, whether it might not have been a big event that happened, but it could have been prolonged, or they grew up in an environment where it was there was a lot of uncertainty and it was unpredictable, and it does come out in different ways. So I think it's really a great thing to share and talk about. But it seems like you did a lot of work then on yourself after that in your mid-20s, right?
Yeah. And I think with the therapy thing, it's all relative to the person. There's like this saying that the worst thing that has happened to you is the worst thing that's happened to you, and that could be like, oh, like boo-hoo, I'm in this leadership position and I don't want to disappoint people, to like, I had a horrifically unstable childhood and now I have all these behaviors that are a result of it, and I need to know how to navigate them. So I think it's all relative, and
for sure.
therapy yeah, in one part it is important to try and understand them and get a handle of them, but then also build up your resilience, about like, well, explore like, what if you did disappoint them? What if you did look stupid here? What is the outcome? What if you explore the thing that you're so afraid about?
That's really
So yeah,
powerful. Exploring the thing that you're afraid of. That's, yeah.
I think they're important mental exercise, and there's definitely for me there's a very clear point in my life where I was maybe taking things as they came and responding to stimuli in just my natural fashion, and then the point after where it's like, well, why do I think this way? Is there merit to it, or is it because I was raised with these type of values, or this is kind of an evolutionary response to not want to look stupid and face rejection that's maybe a little bit miswired in me. Let's there's a Viktor Frankl quote that goes, yeah, between stimulus and response lies freedom, and the wider you can make that gap, the more control you have over your reality.
I actually have that quote written down on my diary to read every day, so I'm so glad that you mentioned that. It's such a good...
I'm just trying to crowbar that gap message between reality and response.
Wow.
Or stimulus and response.
It's really powerful, yeah. And so now that you're looking back and you've done all this work, what do you think success means to you now? Having come through all of that and all the experiences that you had, what does success mean to you as 30-year-old James?
The wonderful thing about success is that it's a ever-changing goalpost, and that is quite subjective. So I think at different times it's meant different things. Like in the context of building an app, like success at one point is like just getting the app live. The second step is getting someone to use it. The third step is getting 100 people to use it. The fourth step is getting people to pay for it, and so on and so forth. And then success at other times for me has gone from, let's say, I want to create as much impact as possible, and that's great. But then I've also been like poor or haven't had the resources that I wanted to do the things in my life. There's an expression that goes that the things that gain you status don't make you money, and the things that make you money don't gain you status. So you can, I flip-flop between those. I think that the definition that I'm currently working on for success is that it's spending the time doing what you want, where you want, when you want, with whom you want.
That's Naval, right?
Yeah, that is actually pretty easy to achieve. I've achieved that in like $50. So it's definitely a more economic approach to my previous definitions of success. But there's like a few other components of it. So I used to previously have my definition or locus of success be external. So it's dependent on like with CoderDojo, was following the journey, growing this thing, impacting young people. Then I went from socialism to capitalism, where I tried to build companies and make money and want to buy my mom a Tesla. And I no longer wanted to be the charity guy who could only like take donations and spend other people's money to making money. And that definition of success was definitely external. It was how I was viewed in the eyes of others. It was how much money I had, which was in large part controlled by others as well and their decision making. And I've kind of wrapped around to this place of letting the activity be the reward. That even if you don't get the outcome, that the process, the journey was rewarding in and of itself, which kind of has refamed what I go after and what I do. So yeah, I think on the success front, while I do want to have high impact and high reach with the things I'm doing right now, what's most important is doing the work and in process and enjoying that. And then irrespective if that's like externally successful or not, if I do that correctly each day, then I go to bed happy.
That's really cool. And what do you think obviously CoderDojo is amazing. It's like phenomenal. It's a global phenomenon and helped so many people and so many young people. But what's your proudest achievement to date, do you think? Is it founding that, or are there other, is it more personal and sort of subjective?
Yeah, there's if we want to say like the proudest, it's totally not business or organizational. There was a one point a few years ago that I found myself in a very difficult circumstance, that I was not enjoying life. I was not enjoying the construct of it. I was pretty miserable. even to the extent where I was some days like afraid to go out in the balcony because I didn't want invasive thoughts, like just generally not enjoying my existence at that point. And I was able to extract myself from that situation and reconfigure my reality. And that marked a huge turning point in my life around the things that I do, my values, my direction. And I think the reason that that's my proudest moment is that in one part, I was able to identify and remove myself from that situation. And it's not always how you get yourself into a situation. It's what you do about it or how you get yourself out of it. But also in seeing how dramatically I changed my reality at that time, then it's totally possible that I do that again. And that gives me optimism for my future that if needs be, or if I find myself in a similar sticky place, I can make such a dramatic shift and make things better again.
So that you can turn things around and elicit, I guess, a lot of wisdom from those really challenging situations that you can leverage. And
if not, then I'll just like post the Instagram photos as if
as if everything's great. Do some selfies. And so on that vein, so you've had quite a journey in those 10 years, right? I mean, it's really a lot. It's very condensed, and there's a lot of learnings and wisdom. What piece of advice from that would you share, the most valuable piece of advice that you have for young people who are starting out in their careers looking to be successful and have their own achievements?
I think that there's like a bunch of things that I found useful, and again, it depends. Is it on the aspect of how you're going through the career? Like I used to be very afraid of like looking stupid or making mistakes, and then in turn I realized that for me at least, like 1 out of 5 things that I do works. So there's a degree of having to fail your way to success, or normalizing failing, even removing the term failing and relabeling it as experiments. And I think with that, if you making mistakes cheap to make, and you can move fast instead of slow, then, and most importantly, course correct when you have new information, then you open yourself up to way more opportunity.
So make mistakes. What did say that again?
So if you're, there's been so many like times I've been faced with a decision I have to make, and I don't know if it's the right decision or not. I don't have the experience, and you talk to people. Most things that you do have been done before, but ultimately you have to make that decision or make that choice. And if you make making the wrong decision cheap to make, that you can be like a week into that decision and be like, no, this actually isn't working out. Now that I have more data, I'm just going to course correct and change course. Then you can move fast and make a lot of opportunities and not be paralyzed by that decision paralysis. And I think you do that through managing your own expectations, being like, I am going to fail. I'm going to fail 1 out of 5 times. It's only that 5th time that it's going to be successful. So I need to get through these other 4 times as quickly as possible. And you can manage the expectations of others and be like, with the information that I have and with this my current decision-making process, this is what I think we should do. But if that's wrong, which is very possible, we'll course correct. And I think you see this in how products are developed. People, don't really know if a feature is going to be successful until they get out into the into the public. You might have like internally you might have like a bias or distortion bubble. So only till you get out there do you know if it's going to be successful or not. You see this in like even like stand-up comedy. Like a lot of comedians, like bombing is the only way for them to get good and refined material, because what you think might be funny or the context that you have mentally, the audience might not have. So you have theories that you put out there, and you have to prove these. And stand-up comedy is one of the only places that you can only do that publicly. You have to publicly fail. So you have to make failing as cheap as possible, and be able to course correct as quickly as possible. And you have to. It's difficult, but you have to depower that sense of failure. So I think again, evolutionary wise, we're afraid of
looking
stupid. Yeah, we're afraid of many things. I think that most people live their lives that way. I think that there's like another expression that like in action like in action ended more dreams than failure ever did, or
That's
something
so
around
true.
that.
Yeah, that is so true.
So like there's another, I guess, like important learning that I have is have had, which is like we all die someday. That I had a few years ago, I had a pretty pretty significant health scare, which the like initial information we got back was like pretty bleak. So it was like a forcing function to kind of reevaluate things. And like fortunately it all came to pass. It's fine. It could happen again. You never know. But I think when you frame things that we're going to die, that like you realize that people are so concerned only with themselves. Like if you do something stupid, yeah, they might remember it for that day, but they're probably not going to remember it a week from now, a month from now. If in a year's time they hold that against you, then they're probably not somebody you want to interact with, that they have like a very limited mindset, that they don't see that failure and making mistakes is the route to growth. I think that you also have to realize that probably on your deathbed, the things you don't do is what you're going to regret. Again, whether you're successful or not is irrespective. To some degree, you can't control if you're successful or not, but you can control if you tried. At least with me, like while I still have hopes and ambitions and things I'd like to do, if they don't come to pass, I'd rather be on my deathbed and know that at least I tried my best. And that's probably in some respects like the same as of having succeeded or not.
Yeah. That's like that's a goosebump moment there. It's
yeah.
That's really, really powerful. Honestly, there's some kind of quote. I can't remember where I read it, but it was maybe from a poem or something. And the person is saying that they heard this whisper all through their life to live, and try. And the whisper was coming from death, because at the end of the day, like you said, we don't know how long we're all going to be here for. Some people, it's shorter than others, and it's just kind of remembering that every day and just like not caring about what other people think and doing what your heart desires, or the dreams that you have in your head, just giving them a try.
Yeah, there's another quote that I like, which I think is Confucius, which is we have two lives, and the second one begins when we realize that we have only one.
Yeah.
And like an important thing in my soul searching part was reading about Stoicism, and there's two phrases, Stoic phrases I really like. The first one is amor fati, which is love fate. I think it's like Nietzsche that says like not merely to bear it, but to embrace it. And the second one is memento mori, which is remember death. And that could be if you're maybe you're with your family and one of your parents is annoying you, or you're being uncomfortable, or there's some minor frustration, and then you realize that like this moment will pass. You won't get this again. Like someday you'll probably be, hopefully, old and infirm and less mobile, and will have wanted to be able to be in this position again, to like experience this friction or whatever it is. So I think now when I do something stupid and I cringe or something, I keep those in mind. And that's also why I'm a lot more like confident about this podcast, because like one day I'm gonna die, you're gonna die.
Who cares?
Is gonna die. Like, 5 billion years, the sun is gonna burn out, so exactly. It's all good.
It's so true.
You're for a good time, not a long time.
Exactly. No, it's so true. It's so true. Did you ever read Cheryl Strayed, the author?
No.
She wrote that book with Reese Witherspoon about the girl that walks the Appalachian Way by herself. And she's, the guy that wrote Fight Club, Chuck, I can never say his second name.
Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about her work. She's a great writer. But she wrote this in one of her books about her mom dying, and the fights that she would have with her mom sometimes, like when they went shopping or something like that. And then, after her mom died, she was writing in the book about, like kind of what she wouldn't give to spend even one more afternoon with her mom. And, before her mom died, they were in this shop one day and they see this little dress, and she didn't have kids at the time, Cheryl Strayed, but she was sort of admiring this dress, and her mom was like, for a little kid, you know, for like a baby. And her mom was saying, I'll buy it for you. And she was like, that's so stupid. Why would you buy me a baby's dress? I don't even have a baby. And her mom bought it for her anyway. And then when her mom had passed away and she did have a baby, she realized like her mom had bought this dress for her first baby, like the first piece of clothing. And it just always stuck with me, not, you know, obviously with my parents, but, you know, even with friends and things, because like sometimes you really miss your friends, and maybe when you're hanging out with them, they annoy you, or your mom, and, you know, you have an argument, and you just remember, if you remember really quickly one day, you'll really wish that you could probably be spending that time with them. It just changes the energy and the perspective and how you have that experience with them. So I think that's a really good message.
I don't think you need to. I think in mindfulness it's called clinging or grasping, but you also don't necessarily need to live in fear of like, oh, this is gonna go away someday, but accept it and recognize that it's a part of the
of life and
the life cycle. And I think with human connections also, as you move through at least again, like this is 30 years, so this is relatively a small sample set of time, but you have different people who are important at different times in life. And that you can be meaningful to somebody for it, or they can be meaningful to you for that period of life, but then you ultimately move on, and there'll be somebody else who's now meaningful at that different stage. So part of that is to embrace that journey. I think that there's an analogy to like a flower that blooms and then withers, and it's not good, it's not bad, it just is.
What about tell us about Conjure and how you started to develop Conjure, which is quite an apt segue into, you know, making the most out of your life and achieving the things that you want to achieve. So it's a new thing that you started. Well, you started a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, but about 2 years ago, and it's been an interesting journey thus far. I think for context as to what it is or why it exists, I think a few years ago, as I've blatantly alluded to, I went through some highs and lows in my 20s and periods of like wild instability and shifting values. And I got pretty interested by the question of like, how can we be systematic about our happiness or subjective well-being and life satisfaction? What does that mean? What are the things that make that up? And I tried to identify behaviors and systems that do this, understand what our portfolio of joy in life is. Is that health, social, contribution, growth, significance? And then also, how do we get feedback loops about the opportunities and risks in our life, and also knowing what's going good. So there's been times when I haven't spent a lot of time socializing. I've been too focused on work. I felt alienated. And then I would feel sad and misattribute that sad. Obviously, it's my lack of success or lack of work progress. Conversely, there's been times where I've probably gotten a little bit too comfy and gone on a go slow, and then I've kind of beat myself up for not having like a rate of achievement, or be like, oh, if I just started this a year ago, or like imagine where I'd be now. So as I learned more about this space and researched, I also looked at the state of systems out there that, well, if you do have a system to help your well-being and life satisfaction, what exists out there. So I started getting, I started like coming up with questions like, why is there nothing out there that detects when I've left my home and at what time? And that acts as a proxy for sunlight exposure, which affects your sleep and circadian rhythm, which affects your well-being or mood. Why is there no automation that uses data from these different sources to like automatically complete when I've run 5K or hit 10,000 steps? To like, what does a product look like that's real time, that has all these keyboard shortcuts? If there's an API, what would other people build on top of it that I can't fathom with the context or experience that I have? So I set out on this journey to build a system that helped me with my style of intentional living. I think everybody's different, but there's a lot of people who look like you, particularly in Ireland, because we're not genetically diverse. A lot of people who look like me.
A lot of people that look like us. There's only 4 or 5 million of them, though, compared to the rest of them.
Wait, you on a podcast with your brother, Siobhan? But I thought that I wanted to build something that was meaningful to me, and I think we talked previously about the locus of success either being external or internal. And I had this rule as I was kind of going through a year of soul searching or researching, being like, well, what am I willing to work on for up to 2 years with no external success? And that if that fails or monetarily, let's say, then I won't consider it a failure because I've learned a lot in an area that I'm interested in. I can take those learnings with me, and it's something that I'll continue to use. And really this kind of journey before destination type mentality. So yeah, I thought that spending 2 years to build a system that would help me be systematic about my well-being and life satisfaction was relatively good investment. And I also knew I managed my expectations because there's plenty of like goal apps out there, habit apps, plenty of these systems, a lot of ebooks you can buy off sketchy Instagram ads, all this kind of way. So I knew that in one part there'd have to be a lot of research and experimentation, that I was probably going to spend several weeks building something, then use it for a few months and realize how close I was to actually if a provider of value or not, or build something that met my needs. I put it out there in the world. I attract other people who think that it might suit them and then get their feedback. And I knew that was going to take a lot of time. So it was probably going to be a lot of laboring away privately, which was true. I think it was 6 months of building it before I let another person use it. I think it was maybe a year before I had the first paying customer and they'd been using it for like a few months at that point. I was waiting until I could prove if I was giving someone value and that they'd be happy to use it. So there was definitely a lot of I track all the time. I put it, so now over 2 years I've passed 4,000 hours of development of the platform.
Amazing.
So I was kind of a little bit anti-startup. Like there's a lot of people like, well, we'll build this thing in a weekend. If by month 3 it hasn't got like $1 million valuation, then it's a complete failure or something.
That's so bad. Yeah, I'm so glad you didn't think like that around it.
Maybe ask 25-year-old James. He might have.
He would have been like, forget about this. No,
exactly. If it's not on the blockchain, it doesn't matter. No, I think people have different things that they're optimizing for, and I think if you're optimizing for a financial outcome, that's one set of parameters that you apply to your decision making and how you go about it. Whereas for me, I was optimizing for value creation for myself, which looks quite different. And then I've kind of broadened that scope a little bit to creating value for others in this particular respect. But I did it solo because I didn't want to take on a co-founder, because in one part there was something selfish that I had something in my head that I wanted to get out. I also didn't know if this thing was going to be successful, so I didn't want to feel beholden to someone else. I didn't raise money because I can't see a situation that I exit. I read the Patagonia founder's book, Yvon Chouinard, and I really identified with their the book is called Let My People Surf, I believe, and I really identified with their kind of I guess their story of how it was founded and what they optimized for and want to see in the world. So I knew that it was going to be a slightly different journey. And again, like if it doesn't pan out still, then I have people who use it daily. I have paying customers. I have people who've built on top of the API. I have, people who, have it open all day and it's quite meaningful to them and a passionate community. But even if that still falls apart, it's not being a waste, because I've grown a lot throughout this process. So I can't lose.
No, you definitely can't lose. Yeah,
I'm like the human Bitcoin as if it didn't crash. It's like a.
And you're bouncing around all over the place. You're living in Japan. You're living back in Ireland. You were in Australia. It seems like you're in a really good place with Conjure, and even the fact that you're developing it with that mindset. It's like it's obviously all that energy is going into it, and it seems like it can't be but bring value to the people that are going to use it and that are going to help them use it to be the people they want to become.
Yeah, I think on the energy and travel fund, I have these exploration periods and then these exploitation periods. and it's kind of similar how agents in AI work. They spend a bunch of time. If you give it like a game to play, it spends a bunch of time, like 80% of its time exploring new ways to complete the objective and to like finish the game, and will fail a lot. And then when it starts predictably getting a result, it'll switch to 80%. It'll switch from exploration mode to exploitation mode, which 80% of the time is just doing the same outcome, getting the result. But 20% of the time, it will try something new and see if it can make any like
improvement.
Nominal improvement. So with I guess how I've been living my life for the last 2 years, I have these exploration modes where I go out and spend time with friends, and it could be Austin, Texas, it could be in Tokyo, Japan, or other places, and kind of really live and socialize and have a good time. Still keep work, still keep discipline, still keep my daily habits, and move the needle every day. I think with Conjure, I've worked on it every day in a row for the last 704 days. I've tracked in it. So no 0 days. Even my like most off days, I have a rule where I have to track at least 1 minute of work for the habit to complete, and then that's like success. So you have to almost like a investment strategy. You have to like factor some failure and risk into the model, and then I have these exploitation modes where, like, for example, this summer I just spent like 3 months heads down coding as much as possible, trying to move the needle, take all the things I thought about and get them out. So yeah, that's been the shift of between those two worlds in my life at the moment, which will probably change with the next phase of life.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will. I mean, it's all about evolving. And Conjure's on the App Store, right? And it's on you can get it on the Google Play Store as well, right?
You can find a Conjure at conjure.so, or if you just Google Conjure habits or Conjure goals, you'll find out everything about it.
That's cool. And just I just wanted to ask you before we finish up, which just flew by that whole hour. Like, can you believe it, James? We've been talking. I could feel like I could talk to you now for another 2 hours. But just, I think it would be helpful because you're mentioning all these quotes and sort of, the stoicism and things that it really helps a lot of people. What were some of the a book or one movie that really impacted your life that you could share the most?
I think the most impactful book was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Yeah. So he was Emperor of Rome almost 2,000 years ago. And then Meditations is actually his journal that he kept that he didn't think would be made for public consumption. Yeah. So jokes on him 2,000 years later. But I also had to be in the right place in life to read it. So maybe if I read it at 18, 19, it wouldn't have resonated. But yeah, after I'd kind of gone through adversity, had collected a lot of varying data points in life and had highs and lows, it really spoke to me. And I think the biggest takeaway was that all the problems that he has, of if he's doing a good job, bad job, what people think about him, if it matters what people think about him, how can he not give in to temptation or the fact that he has to be disciplined when motivation is failing. All these things, you identify with them so much, and you realize that they're everlasting. And he comes up with remedies and solutions for them. So it's definitely been. I read it at the right time in life, and I'm very thankful that I did. It's
a wonderful book, and I think it's something that you can read again and again and learn more, get more insights and learnings from it every time you read it. I think it's a great gift to give people. I give it to people a lot, like at Christmas or for their birthdays. What about any movies just lost?
Oh, we mentioned it, and I don't know if this is the note that we want to end on.
Okay.
I feel like there should be a bunch of caveats, and I know how it's going to be taken, but whatever. Again, sun's going to implode in 5 billion years, so who cares? The Fight Club. I watched that as a I guess it was a teenager. I read the book also, but the message of the movie was that there's like this default path that people follow, and they often follow it out of fear, and they get dragged into someone else's reality. And for me, that movie was about, now whether you want to do that with explosives or building apps, you can build your own reality. And and you can identify that this default path that's set up around you
doesn't have to be like that.
Exactly. So that was a film that had a lot of had an impact on me, and probably made me open my eyes a little bit to the values and thought processes around me, and were they there for good reason, or did people kind of inherit them and adopt them, and did I identify with them?
Well, James, thank you so much for your time today. I honestly really, really appreciate it, and it's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you. I wish we had more time, because maybe we can do this again in like a year or something after, and see where you are this time next year, because you seem to be packing a lot in and learning a lot.
Yeah, we'll see. It could all go wrong. I could be eating my words. Do not listen to anything that I said a year ago. I retract it all.
It's all part, it's like you said, when you go through these moments, and then it's all part of the journey, right? And trying to take the best of it and keep moving on. So it's to just endure, right?
Exactly. And have fun in the process.
Yeah. Okay, James, thank you. Really, really appreciate it.